Disney is responsible for creating a ton of films. Some good, some bad, but nonetheless, a lot of movies. But there were even more Disney movies that we never got to see. Movies that were cancelled. Some of these movies would have drastically changed the history of animation. Today we'll only cover Disney's cancelled animated movies. And I'll only be talking about influential cancellations and ones I found interesting. And even after only covering the absolute coolest cancelled movies, there is still enough where I've had to split this video into multiple parts. So with that said, let's take a retrospective look at the history of cancelled Disney movies.
He said it! He said it!
Also, I'm going to try asking people to leave a like at the beginning of the video to see if that makes a difference in the video's performance. And while you're down there, you can hit that subscribe button. Alright, starting off with the very first cancelled Disney movie, and arguably the most important, Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland? But I've seen that, you might be thinking. But this was a cancelled version of the movie from the 1930s, rather than the movie we eventually got. This movie would have radically changed the landscape of animation as a whole, as Snow White would no longer be the first Disney movie, which would have heavily altered the general moviegoer's perspective of animation, as the trippy, and at times downright disturbing world of Wonderland might not have settled well with audiences at the time. Disney as a company might not even exist, as I doubt Alice in Wonderland would have been the smash hit that Snow White was in 1938, and this wouldn't have been good for Walt's wallet, as the company was already struggling with the budget to finish Snow White, and without it being a success, it would have meant the end of the company. They definitely made the right decision of creating Snow White instead, and revisiting Alice in Wonderland at a later date. Although not movies, there were a ton of cancelled Mickey Mouse and Mickey Mouse adjacent shorts, as well as Silly Symphonies, which were short musical films created from 1929 to 1939. Now there is a ton of these that never made it off the drawing board, but most of them aren't terribly interesting. But there is one worth mentioning, The Emperor's New Clothes, which would have been the classic story by Hans Christian Andersen, who you might have heard about from a little story called The Little Mermaid. A lot of his works have resulted in cancelled Disney movies, so we'll see him again soon. Hans' cancelled short, The Story of the Emperor's New Clothes, would have gone as the following. An emperor wanted the best clothes in all the land, the most majestic clothes possible, clothes only fit for an emperor. His wish would be granted, as two weavers would sell him magical clothes that only the most clever people could see. Those who were dumb would not be able to. The emperor, being the vain man he is, claimed to be able to see the clothes, as he did not want to be perceived as stupid. He then went out in public to show all the townspeople his magical outfit. But he had been conned, as the emperor was not wearing any clothes at all, and the entire town saw his willy. 1 year later, Disney would try to revive the idea of the Emperor's New Clothes, this time starring Mickey Mouse. But again, this never finished production. The idea eventually was sort of made a reality, not in The Emperor's New Groove, but its direct-to-video sequel, Kronks New Groove, where the elderly townspeople are conned by Yzma into drinking placebo youth potions. Next we have Disney's version of Peter Rabbit, which was, of course, cancelled. This was due to the creator of the Peter Rabbit books, Beatrix Potter, denying Walt's proposal. Now here's one that I really wish it being cancelled wasn't the case, Reynard the Fox, which would have followed the classic fables about a tricky fox. Something about the idea just sounds like a missed opportunity. The closest we've gotten to this is Robin Hood. Next, we have one that I agree with the decision to cancel it. A short featuring the return of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Judging by Walt's expressed dislike of sequels, it makes sense this was cancelled. Oh Walt, if only you could see Disney now. Penguin Island is easily one of the weirdest cancelled Disney movies. The story would have followed a religious man finding an island of penguins and mistaking them as humans, and then baptizing them. Disney originally planned to create an animated Wizard of Oz movie, but were unable to gain the film rights, and we ended up with the movie we know today. Chanticleer has to be one of the most disappointing cancelled movies. It would have followed the barnyard, led by a vain rooster who believed without him, the sun would not rise. The fellow barnyard animals would grow to resent him due to his rude behavior. The barnyard would then be invaded by outside animals, led by none other than the previously mentioned Reynard the Fox. The rooster would learn a lesson of kindness by the end of the movie. Not only was Chanticleer cancelled, but Reynard's role in the movie was cancelled for the second time. The same year, Disney was also working on Don Quixote, which was a story about a man who believed everything he read to be true. Believing these made-up stories, he would set out on a quest to fight monsters that he had read about. This is a project that has been repeatedly tried by Disney, only to be cancelled every time. I think the idea of this movie is better suited for live action, and Disney agrees because they're supposedly still working on a live action version of the movie. Switching back to some shorts, during the wartime era, there were some cancelled military shorts starring Goofy, where he would be fighting 1940s German soldiers. And another short that was left unmade was Chicken Little, starring Mickey Mouse and friends. And I promise I'm not making this up as another excuse to talk about Chicken Little. I want to escape this never-ending nightmare of Chicken Little. Now for a cancelled sequel. Bambi 2 was originally supposed to happen in the 1940s, dubbed Bambi's Children, which would have been about, well, Bambi's children. We did eventually receive a direct-to-video sequel of Bambi, which instead of being about his children, was a prequel to the original movie. Next we have one of my personal favorite cancelled movies. Not in the sense that I'm happy that it was cancelled, but we did eventually get to see it. Not in the form of a Disney movie, but instead a Looney Tunes short. If this movie was made by Disney, it would have been about a team of gremlins who love to destroy airplanes. Their knack for destroying airplanes would be used to fight 1940 German soldiers. Time to talk about Hans Christian Andersen again. Disney planned to make a movie not based on one of his stories, but the author of said stories himself. This would have been a hybrid animated movie, like the best movie of all time, Looney Tunes Back in Action, where we would visit the worlds of some of his classic stories, including The Emperor's New Clothes and The Little Mermaid. This would mark the third time The Emperor's New Clothes was cancelled. Some films just can't catch a break. Absolutely Hulk smashing our way into the next one, we have the return of some faces we will be getting used to by now, with Chanticleer and Reynard. Another attempt to bring both of these characters to the big screen again failed. A third movie in the Donald Explores the World in a Very Boring Way, or as Disney likes to call them, South of the Border films, was planned, this time exploring Cuba, with a new rooster added to the cast. Let me be clear, kinda happy this one was cancelled, so I didn't have to watch it for the wartime rankings. Chanticleer was once again brought back from the dead, only to have his life support pulled for the last time. The company had the decision to create either Chanticleer or the Sword and the Stone, and they chose to say goodbye to Chanticleer once and for all. Rest in peace, big old rooster. Disney, looking to creating more films based on fairy tales, considered Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and Hansel and Gretel, before all being thrown away. Personally, I don't really mind any of them being cancelled, as by this time, the company was thriving by adapting more obscure stories and creating original ones. Next we have Scruffy, which would have been about apes fighting 1940 German soldiers. Yusakana was meant to be a musical experience similar to Fantasia, and I can't say I'm upset this one was cancelled, as the other music films were rather boring. You've most likely heard of Where the Wild Things Are, but what you might not have known is Disney tried to make their own movie out of it, before being scrapped due to budgeting restrictions. It did eventually receive a movie that I haven't seen since it was released, so I don't want to call it bad, but I do remember it being quite disturbing looking. Alright, there you have it, the first part of the history of cancelled Disney movies. Next time we'll be looking at some films like the prequel to Roger Rabbit, and more scrapped sequels.